Good evening, my friends. This is an excerpt of a story called "And We'll Shut the Door on the World." It's the second story in my collection, Betrayals and Entrails. Thank you. Mary screamed as one man was pushed or vacuumed wailing through a small hole made by a few absent bricks in the wall of an abandoned old building. His hips and waist went through first, then his legs, bones tense for a split second, then snapping. His mouth opened to show his raw agony in a brief sear. Mary saw his headless, ragdoll body emerge from the other side of the building before his loose head, caught on a ledge of concrete, was sucked through a window 3 floors below after rolling down the side of the building. It was pushed against the building's wall as it fell and effected a gradual enlargement after the skull's initial rupture. Mary could not take her eyes off his expanding, neckless face. The expression of calamitous, sudden grief was etched into its muscles and beyond. Another man was propelled up, in a perfect vertical direction, over the house. He reappeared a fraction of a second later, propelled downward on the same axis, splattered on the ground, innards shot out, then was picked up again with his semi-attached guts to splatter on the ground on the other side. Mary had frozen. The paralysis felt like she was being strangled all over. She could not take her eyes from this mush of a man disappearing, then hitting the ground at incredible speed, each instance of his corpse less and less manlike, wider and flatter and bulbous and flabby like an exploding cowpat of distorted flesh. It looked like it happened in flashes, as if she was watching a movie reel of still images, each taking the man closer to final disassembly. Bits of bone joined the rest of whirling, crying men as the dead, slammed corpse became a fragmented, sloshy gut mush. The man's death was over in a few seconds, pulverized, then pulled apart by unknown whirling forces amidst the barrage of immaterial flashes within the circle of death. Mary guessed he had hit the ground about 40 times that she had seen, and did not want to consider the obvious fact that she should double whatever she guessed to account for the times he had smashed into the ground behind her on the other side of the building. The dregs of his body spun around the house faster and faster with the semi-alive group of his hysterical, howling co-workers, giving the slop of men and junk a red taint, eventually becoming lighter and lighter pink as his flesh mixed in with everything else. She could only guess there were about 200 people, some wheelbarrows, bags of cement, planks of wood, tools, shards of windows, parts of a bulldozer, sucked up and spinning through the air. The slush of people and objects were making a kind of cylindrical, ever-moving wall. Mary got close to the window and looked up, but couldn't see how high it went because of the ledge of the roof. Sometimes cars, sandwich boards, street signs, and organs and limbs of people were flung away from the vortex in sporadic bursts. Mary groaned as she saw the traffic in the city slowing down as people pointed and leaned out of their cars to look. She thought buildings were bending, but she wasn't sure. She saw concrete wrinkling and lumps of stray dirt hovering, floating and flung in random directions. The distant, straight lines of energy from under their house brightened and faded in rapid pulses. Windows blasted apart in the close office buildings. Thousands of staff were ripped out of them into the circle, pulled and yanked and twisted. More cars were inhaled by the greedy vortex and wrung like wet clothing into their simplified ingredients, bent and squashed, twisted even though people were in them. Huge clouds of thick blood splattered out as they imploded, whirling into the frenzy like ink stirred in oil. A new group of people crashed into each other, bludgeoned through the outer layer of more solid objects. 2 men struck perpendicular at their waists, and both were elongated in opposite directions with their heads and feet. Both of them stretched kilometres long in a few seconds until their dissolution into base fragments. The energy had now become brown with junk, although Mary could see incomplete layers to its colours. They made up concentric, semi-complete circular walls of a whisking garbage rainbow. Furthest from her, black and white, she understood to be metal and concrete, and bone. The humans that had been longest in the vortex had separated, and their liquid offal sloshed about as though in a giant blender. A pinkish grey flabby layer had a membranish wobbling quality to it. That's muscle, Mary thought. In front of that was a layer of organs and nebulous offal, blood and dripping, another mucus flung outward in huge slow bubbles, penetrating the debris as it spun until it found its own layer. Thank you, my friends. Good night.